Welcome to Mondays with Vish. That's Vish Kumaran. I'm Grant Cohn. We got a lot of Niners stuff to talk about that we have planned, but there's also breaking news. So we're going to lead off with that. We are going to talk about Deshaun Watson a lot. We're going to talk about Jimmy. But first, we're going to talk about some coaches because there's been a shakeup with the 49ers coaching staff. Nope, that's not what I want to talk about. This is what I want to talk about. First of all, the offensive line coach, John Benton, is leaving, and he's now the offensive line coach / run game coordinator for the Jets. Vish, what do you think of this?
I think it's a good hire for Mike LaFleur, bring a guy who's been around the league for years, a veteran guy that's going to help instill this run game. And, offensive line coaches usually play a big part in the NFL in the run schemes and all of that teams use. And obviously, Mike LaFleur wants to run this Shanahan run game. And if you're not being able to bring Kyle, if you're not able to bring Mike McDaniel, he's probably the next best person to bring. So I think it's a good hire for the Jets, but I don't think it really affects the 49ers. If you hear Mike Shanahan and Kyle Shanahan talk about offensive line coaches, even in Washington, they mentioned Chris Forster, that he was a really good coach and that they respect him a lot. And he had that issue in Miami that's pretty bad. So I don't know if he's gotten over that problem and all of that. But I think if you look at the 49ers from a coaching perspective, yeah, Benton's a pretty good coach, but with Forrester coming in, I don't think that there's going to be much of a miss.
I don't even know how good of a coach John Benton is. I understand the value he holds to the Jets. You laid that out perfectly. But to me, he was part of the problem here with the Niners. They do run block well, but Mike McGlinchey hasn't gotten better under John Benton. So I got to wonder. And so I feel like losing him from the Niners perspective, not a big deal. But what they did is they promoted Chris Forster, who everyone knows what happened with him in Miami. We don't have to say it again, but look it up if you don't know. He's been around the league a long time. But again, he was on this staff last year. He was part of the problem along with Benton. So keep Forster, that's fine. But what I would think the Niners should do is bring in someone else. If they had 2 offensive line coaches last year, bring in another one to help Chris Forster, because it seemed like they need an outside element to make this work, because that was the worst position group on the team last year.
I actually disagree there. I think that the offensive line coaching has actually been quite okay. They've had a lot of moving parts in their offensive line, and a lot of guys who are less than in terms of their talent, in terms of where they were drafted, have to play a lot of snaps for them, be it a Daniel Brunskill, be it a Ben Garland, who was a defensive lineman when he started in the NFL, Colton McKivitz, who they just picked in the 5th round, and I think those guys have done okay. I think McGlinchey is kind of the sore thumb that really sticks out, because he was drafted 9th overall, and he had an okay season in 2019. Joe Staley retires. You're hoping McGlinchey takes the next step, and he didn't take the next step as a pass protector this year. He got better as a run blocker, but he was still struggling in pass protection. So I think maybe they could bring in, like they brought in a pass rush specialist, maybe a pass blocking specialist or something like that. But
bring in someone else. That's what I'm saying, man. I think you had 2 offensive line coaches last year. The 2 of them couldn't figure out the solutions to the problem. You lost one. Bring in one more. And again, I keep mentioning the guy, but he used to be with the Niners. He was with Jacksonville last year. George Warhop, he's available, I believe. I believe he's worked with Chris Forster before. They know each other. Be a really sensible hire for the Niners. Just bring in someone with a fresh set of eyes to look at this issue, because maybe it's not Chris Forster's problem that Mike McGlinchey's technique has eroded the last few years, but it has. When you watch him now, he doesn't punch. He tries to catch. I don't know what that is, and it's not what Chris Forster and John Benton are teaching, but whatever they're trying to teach, it's not translating. To McGlinchey in particular, I don't know what technique he's using, so bring in someone else who can deliver the message another way. That's all I'm saying.
Maybe. And
keep Forster. That's fine.
Sure. But ultimately, regarding Benton, I don't think that the loss of him is going to be that much of a problem.
It might be good.
I think the thing I do want to just dispel is that I think you and Jason touched on this on your show, I think Saturday, and I wanted to touch on it further, is that I think fans get too attached to these names. Like, oh, Adam Peters, he's really good, right? Or some wide receivers coach or some linebackers coach. They get really attached to expecting this guy to be really good. And, that guy might be really good at his role, But ultimately, when it's the head coach, it's the GM, as long as you're not losing those guys, the position.
And from a fan's perspective, it's just the personnel guy you've heard of because he's on the team you root for. How many personnel guys do you know? And how do you differentiate them? How many offensive line coaches have you heard of?
Exactly.
How do you rank them? What's their PFF scores?
Right. Like, I think that Jim Harbaugh had two, right? Tim Drevno and Mike Solari. And I guess, people didn't react in any type of way when Tim Drevno left with Jim Harbaugh and Mike Solari. So those types of things, or Tim Drevno, I think he got a different job in 2012, right?
That's right.
So there was that, but you know what? Ultimately, I think that it's as long as Kyle Shanahan is there, and as long as Kyle Shanahan is there, it doesn't matter if John Benton leaves or Mike LaFleur leaves.
All I want to say before we move on to the next guy is, to me, it's not a bad thing for the 49ers, and it actually is an opportunity for them to improve that position group. I don't know that just promoting Chris Forrester improves it. It might, but I think now you got an opening, you got a vacancy, you got some money you can spend to bring in another guy who works well with Chris Forrester. I feel like it's an opportunity. It's a good thing that they lost him. I was saying as my official role as quality control, I said fire that guy. So the fact that they didn't have to fire him and Robert Saleh wanted him, good. And, if the Jets are looking, hey, you got a good guy too, I guess. All right, let's move on. Rich Scangarello's coming back. Apparently Shane Day's out, or they're going to work together. I don't know what's happening with Shane Day, but Scangarello's coming back, and he's now going to be the quarterback coach again. What do you think of that?
Again, it's just, okay, you lose Mike LaFleur, right? Rick Scangarello has been in this offense for a couple years. He now has coordinator experience. It's just another guy to bring in a juice for the pass game to help out Mike McDaniel, because he's going to be shouldering a bigger responsibility now that him and LaFleur won't be splitting the coordinator duties, and he'll be manning it mostly by himself. So I think
it's with the game planning. That's interesting.
Right. I think it's just an extra person to bring in that way. Again, I don't think it's going to change their plan at quarterback or change what they do with these quarterbacks. Maybe he's a better quarterback coach than Shane Day, maybe, but he also was available and nobody wanted him, and then Philly brought him in as an assistant. So this isn't a guy that's like the marquee quarterback whisperer, right? So ultimately, I think it's just another guy who they're comfortable with. He's comfortable with the players, and they're just bringing him in to help out with replacing Mike LaFleur in his role.
I'll be a little bit more positive with this than you are. I think that it can't be bad. I'm going to put it that way. It can't be a bad thing. It might be a good thing, because again, I felt that John Benton at worst was part of the problem last year, and at best you could say he wasn't part of the solution. Same with Shane Day. Those two position groups were problems. And since Shane Day's been here for 2 seasons, none of the quarterbacks have really improved. Maybe that's not his fault, but it's not like he can point to anything and be like, yeah, I did this, I'm really good. So bringing back Rich Scangarello, Garoppolo played pretty well under him for 5 games. Mullins I don't know if he's anything special, but what my point is, it's not a bad thing. It's definitely not a bad thing. And it might help. It might.
Yeah. Bringing him in doesn't, I'm not saying it's hurt. I'm just saying it's not going to change anything, but it's not like he's going to be a negative. By having him on the staff, it's going to help out.
And he might be an upgrade over Shane Day. I don't really see what Shane Day has accomplished since in his 2 years with the Niners. I don't think there's anything he can really point to and be like, I did this. This is the effect of my coaching. Maybe that's a harsh way to look at it, but he's had 2 seasons. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I think people are trying to look for excuses and reasons as to why Jimmy Garoppolo's play has deteriorated. So the quarterback coach becomes the ultimate thing. But go back and watch 2018. This issue with people, his footwork, it's not like he's Tom Brady. He's never been Tom Brady or Drew Brees, where his feet are always moving. He's always stepping up and all of that. Even in 2017, he threw off platform a lot. But this standing in the pocket in one spot and shuffling his hips and throwing the ball, that started in 2018. And that was before Shane Day ever arrived to coach him. And that was with Rick Scangarello. So
I got a little nugget to tell you. And I don't think I've ever told you this. This is old, and I forgot about it until recently. But in 2017, when Jimmy Garoppolo got traded here and he went on that little run and he hadn't gotten the big contract extension yet, they were still negotiating. One of the things that him and Don Yee were initially thinking of putting as like a stipulation in the contract was a new quarterback coach. They wanted to bring the guy from New England, Now, they ultimately stuck with Rich Scangarello because Scangarello was the guy who got him prepared. Remember, he basically put him on that month crash course and I guess, proved himself. And it would have looked bad to just get the guy fired. But that was one of the things they were thinking. They wanted to bring their own guy. And maybe they should have, maybe he needs it. If you think about it, a quarterback coach is kind of like the caddy. Like for a golfer, he's the guy like, hey, your backswing's a little messed up. Maybe you should use that's what the quarterback coach is there to help you with your mechanics and your swing. And you got to have a guy you trust.
Mm-hmm.
You got to
that's super interesting, actually. I'm glad you told me this. This is fantastic.
It's ancient history, but that's true. That's a really important tidbit because actually also the other thing is if you look at the 49ers offensive staff, something quarterbacks are really comfortable with, and I think that's why guys who played quarterback often get coaching jobs way too early is because they want to bring other quarterbacks onto the staff. Who on the 49ers staff was a former quarterback? You got Kyle Shanahan, wide receiver, Mike McDaniel, wide receiver. I don't know what quarterback, and now he's gone.
Yeah, I don't know what Shane Day's thing is or Rick Scangarello, but they weren't really highly regarded as players in terms of like quarterback. That's why, you see Mike Kafka. Now he's the new it guy with Andy Reid because he's a former quarterback, backup player. Everybody's seen him around. So those types of things because he understands.
And that'll be Nick Mullins one day.
Right. And he understands the difficulties that it takes for players to be in the NFL. So that's why these former quarterbacks are relatable for quarterbacks. So I think that's an interesting tidbit. And maybe it's something along those lines.
Yep. Okay, let's move on. Now let's start getting into the good stuff. This is just a prediction one. And we've been talking about this for months. I want to get on record now with some predictions just for the sake of it, even though it's only January 18th and nothing's going to happen for a couple of months. But Bish, which team will Jimmy Garoppolo play for in 2021 and why? Let's get your mid-January prediction.
Yeah, I'm gonna say he's staying. And I've thrown out so many different possibilities of guys they should sign. Money is rich at this point just because of what's going on with the COVID and all of that, the way the cap has gone down. You've outlined, you have an awesome little tidbit about which quarterbacks win and how the money, you can't pay quarterbacks too much. I think they're going to ultimately keep Jimmy and address some sort of future contingency plan through the draft and maybe sign some sort of veteran to maybe challenge him and push him. I think the Niners have too much to risk by cutting him, and they'll feel that if they cut him and they can't replace him, they just threw away a year. And so they'll just stick with what seems like the best case of the worst case scenario, which is keep Jimmy Garoppolo, bring a couple other guys in, and just see what happens in 2021 because we have so many guys that are leaving in 2022. Now, my opinion on this it's a little bit, I don't like it. It's because the one thing I've sometimes been frustrated about Kyle Shanahan is that I feel like he's played the fence with Jimmy Garoppolo way too much.
I agree.
It's where he's not into Jimmy Garoppolo, and everybody thinks it's cool that, see, Kyle Shanahan is so frustrated. Look at him throw up his hands on the sideline because of his quarterback. That's not cool.
It's not cool.
Why do you want to see your coach frustrated about his quarterback?
Yeah.
And it's not good.
He signed off one.
Right. It's not good to see. So, I'm a little sick of him playing the fence. I wish he would just take the leap of faith and say, you know what? It didn't work with Jimmy. Let's get rid of Jimmy. Let's let him go wherever he wants. If he has success, he has success. I could care less because it didn't work for me. And it's the same thing I wanted him to do with Dante Pettis. He didn't do it with Dante Pettis. So I don't think he'll do it with Jimmy.
All right, let me take it from here because I think you're right on. You're brilliant. The concept of riding the fence is what we have to talk about because that's what the Niners are doing. All right. They structured this contract in such a way that the last 3 years you can move on from Jimmy if you want to. That's the whole perk of the structure of this contract. You can cut him, you can trade him. He's movable. But keeping him, he's expensive. So the design of the contract was either to move on from him by now or to extend him by now. One or the other. Make up your mind. By keeping him at the end of this deal, you're riding the fence. He's too expensive. He's not worth $26.9 a season. What you can do is extend the contract. Give him another signing bonus. Give him a 5-year extension. Make him cheap now, backload it. That's what you do. or you trade him. One or the other. Keeping him on this deal is not tenable. You can't do it. They shouldn't have done it last year. They should have traded him last year and brought in Brady or extended him. One or the other. They rode the fence and they can't do it again. So what I'm going to say is I think they're going to trade him back to New England. The rumor I heard last year was that they could have had a first-round pick for him and they turned him down. This year, the offer is going to be lower, but I think that they're going to take what they can get. I don't know what the offer is going to be. I think they'll probably end up getting more than we expect. I think the Patriots really hold Jimmy Garoppolo in high regard. I think they feel that they can rehabilitate him. And if they offered him a 1 for him last year, maybe the Niners could get a late 2 for him this year. I don't know. But my prediction is that there's going to be a convoluted trade, maybe with players involved too, and multiple picks. But eventually, when it all is boiled down, Jimmy's going back to the Patriots, and I think it's going to happen before the draft. I think it'll happen in the next couple months. And the way I look at it is when you ask Kyle, he says the right things, but there's no enthusiasm behind him about Jimmy. And when you ask Jimmy, he says the right things, but there's no enthusiasm about coming back. And it almost seems like both sides have been like, look, we agree what we're going to try to do here. Let's just keep our mouths freaking closed and end this and have no drama and move on. And that's the way I read it.
Okay, so this is super interesting, right? So let's go with this. I have one more spot then if we're going to go with this, okay?
Yeah.
So it's being reported heavily now that Josh McDaniels might get the Philadelphia job, okay?
Ooh.
And people say, allegedly, again, I don't know this for sure. That's what people say. I don't know. But they say that Josh McDaniels loves Jimmy Garoppolo.
Right.
So if you remember what Josh McDaniels did the first time he got a head coaching job, right? The whole thing they brought him in was the young quarterback guru to help out Jay Cutler. Well, he traded Jay Cutler immediately and started Kyle Orton. I think that there maybe Josh McDaniels does that with Carson Wentz,
right,
and gets Jimmy Garoppolo and goes on with that. So that's a possibility. My second thing is I think it's much harder to trade him this year than it was last year. And that's because last year, getting a 1-year rental on his contract, which this year wasn't too bad, seemed like something, okay, we can get him for 1 year. His contract's cheap. We're move off of him, and he's a solid starting quarterback coming off a solid season. Did I lose you or did you lose me?
No, you're just going in and out a little bit, but you're good. You're good.
Okay. He's a solid starting quarterback coming off a solid season, and we can win with him that way. This year, you add another injury to his list of injuries, and you add the fact that he's not coming off a solid season, and you only have 1 season of sample size to say he's a solid player. So, and I do think he's a solid player. I think he's a pretty good one. And so that's that. So I don't think that there's going to be a huge trade market to trade for his salary next year. And because of that,
no, the other thing it's a good point. Hold on. Let's stick with that real quick. I think because I preface this by saying you got to do something with this contract. You're riding the fence to let it play out. The team that acquires him has to extend his contract. And I think the Patriots like him. They know him. They developed him. I think they can trade for him, whatever it would take, maybe a 3 or a 2, basically, and renegotiate his deal. Say we'll give you an extension. We'll keep you here long term, but we got to get your cap number low at least in 2021. I mean, because the cap's going down. But we'll give you long term security and we'll backload it and you'll get money. That's what
they asked the Niners to do what they did with the Titans had to do with Ryan Tannehill, which was change his contract around and make the Dolphins pay a large portion of it. I don't think the Niners would be willing to do that. I don't think so.
I think what they're going to do is I think they like him. I think they want him. I think they're going to drop their trade from a first to basically a second, and they'll extend his contract. And it'll be his cap number will be low in 2021. It'll be backloaded, and then they can continue to renegotiate as they get down the line if they still like him. I mean, that's what you do with these quarterbacks. You renegotiate.
Okay, fair enough. And then there was another thing I wanted to bring up, and it goes to the riding the fence. And it's because I've seen a lot of stuff that says that Kyle Shanahan never wanted Jimmy Garoppolo in the first place. And that speaks to the fact that he wanted Kirk Cousins more. So I wanted to kind of dispel that rumor. Yeah. Was Kyle Shanahan upset that they traded for Jimmy Garoppolo? Probably, but I don't think it was because they got Garoppolo. It was more because he was so obsessed with getting Kirk Cousins.
Right.
And just something to put out is February 5th, 2017, after Kyle Shanahan lost the Super Bowl, Ian Rappaport, maybe the most plugged in person in the NFL, tweeted this about Kyle Shanahan. Hashtag 49ers starting QB could be in the building today. If Kyle Shanahan doesn't get Kirk Cousins, his targets, Jimmy Garoppolo, then Matt Schaub. Which means what?
Matt Schaub.
But it means what? It means what?
It means he liked him.
Yes,
he liked him. He also said that when he was in Cleveland and he was evaluating quarterback that year, he didn't like Johnny Manziel, and his two favorites were Carr and Garoppolo. He said that before the Super Bowl that year.
Right. And then when they traded for him, remember Mary Kay Cabot, the Browns writer who's super plugged in, put out the piece that he really liked Garoppolo before the draft, and he had a private workout with Garoppolo and all of that. So let's not act like this is a quarterback that he's just been totally out on and he's never wanted, right?
No.
This is someone who if they didn't get Kirk Cousins, they were probably going to try and make a move, and they inquired about him. And that was when the whole John Lynch, Tom Brady story came out, where John Lynch called about Jimmy Garoppolo. Belichick said, no way. Then John Lynch said, what's your plan at quarterback? Is Tom Brady available? And, it was this real cool story about John Lynch. So there's all of that. So yeah. I want to just give Kyle Shanahan a full pass here, because I think that the things that are said about him in this situation aren't exactly flattering. And they're said in a flattering way because Jimmy isn't playing good football. So It's like, oh, look, Kyle is so angry. But it's not good for your head coach to be so publicly out on your quarterback. And especially again, he's going to play for you next year.
I feel like to use a terrible cliche, like the toothpaste is out of the tube. Like, everyone knows Kyle doesn't like Jimmy. Everyone knows or can kind of tell that Jimmy feels a little wronged by the Niners putting him out there injured. It's over. The marriage is over. And they can say what they want, but if the Patriots still like Jimmy, I think the Niners will be more than willing to make that happen. And that's my prediction. Let's see what happens. And hold on, because for this to happen, the Niners would have to have a replacement, right?
Right. But here's the thing. If they bring him back, I'm going to say it right now, which was my prediction, right? I said they were going to bring him back. If they bring him back, they'll be making the same mistake that they made last year, which is trying to make something work that didn't work the first time. You got to just start fresh, bring some new energy into the building, and move on for both people.
To bring him back, you'd have to extend his contract. You'd have to renegotiate his contract. You'd have to take 10 to 15 million of his base salary in 2021, convert it to signing bonus, make his cap percentage way lower, but that would effectively lock him into your team for the next 2-3 years, and they don't want to do that. So they got to move on. You cannot ride the fence another season. If he's on this team next year, you extend his deal and renegotiate it. Otherwise, you're not going to win Super Bowl next year. And then I think they would be much more willing to move on than to extend his contract. Wouldn't you agree with that?
I agree. I think their best case scenario next year, if they keep him, would be being what the Rams were this year. Really good team, up and down season, 10-6, make the playoffs, maybe win a playoff game, get bounced.
Totally agree. Because he'd be making about that percentage. What Goff's making down there, 15. You can't win that way. Even if you have the number one defense in the league and an excellent running game, you just get to a certain point. So now, okay, so you say they're going to stick with Jimmy. I say they're going to trade Jimmy. Let's talk Watson. There is a I don't know what the possibility is that the Niners can get him, but there's a possibility. And I said that the way that I would do it is to trade for him and then trade him away after 1 year and get all the picks back. Because I don't like the idea of paying any quarterback all the money that he gets. And it's basically a baseball move. You see baseball teams do it all the time.
It's Moneyball.
Yeah, you trade
a Moneyball move.
And then you trade them away. You trade the picks and then you get them back. And you do it over again. But in football, there's chemistry, there's a scheme, there's teammate. It's different than baseball. So could it work in your opinion, or is this better in theory?
I think it's better in theory. It's too many moving parts, just because in football there's so much put into the quarterback being the alpha of the team, right? I think there's way too much put into it, but there is stock put into it. And you want to rally around your quarterback and your quarterback be a leader. That's why quarterback gets way too much credit when teams win, and quarterback takes way too much blame when teams lose. It's just a product of the business. It's just the way it's perceived, and it's all of that. So I think it's better in theory. I think it's a very progressive idea, and I do think there's a point where the NFL is going to start getting closer to this concept. And I think the first move in this place was when Arizona realized, hey, we have the number one overall pick. Josh Rosen is fine, but we don't feel convinced that his ceiling is that high. We've got this super freak coming out. Cliff Kingsbury really loves him. Who cares? We took Josh Rosen at 10. Let's just trade. Let's just get whatever we can get for him and start anew with Kyler Murray and restart our counter. Because the other thing that teams are realizing is that with this new rookie wage scale where you don't have Sam Bradford coming out in the draft and being the highest paid player in the NFL and all of that, with this new rookie wage scale, what's happening is that you have this, after their first year, you have this 4-year window if you draft the right guy to just get everybody, stack your team, and go win the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And so the other thing that it does is that, in theory, for Arizona, what it did was it reset their counter. Now, instead of having to be good in 2019, 2020, 21, or 2020, 2021 with Josh Rosen, now they only have to be good because 2019 is kind of their rookie season, 2020 get a little better. Then now next year is going to be the year that pressure's all on them because Kyler Murray is going to be in his 3rd season with that. So I think that you do have an idea of where this league is trending, but I don't think it'll ever get to the point where you're taking a player of Deshaun Watson's caliber. Right.
All right. So let me try to do it a different way, because that's extreme. I mean, the fans would be so upset and the team would be upset. So here's what you could do. You trade for Watson. You don't get rid of him after 1 year. You keep him. You try to renegotiate his deal. Be like, dude, we can't win with you making 15. Let's extend you. Let me give you another signing bonus. Can we backload it? Let's try to work together. And if he's unwilling, you give it a shot with him making all this money. And if it doesn't work, you always have the ability to trade him. Like, look at the Seahawks. They could trade Russell Wilson whenever they want and get a haul, even though he's super expensive. I mean, a lot of teams are dying to spend all this money on quarterbacks, even though it doesn't really work. So, you could trade Watson whenever you want. You could try it out. You could try to win with him making all this money and think, him and Kyle make it work. If they don't, you trade him in 2 years. You trade him in 3 years. He'd only be 28. I mean, it's always a move you could do if it's just been proven that there really is this cap. Because real quick, I say that it's never been done, a quarterback winning a Super Bowl while he takes up more than 13.1. Well, really, the line is 10, because the quarterbacks who have won a Super Bowl while making more than 10%, Brett Favre, Eli Manning, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Steve Young, that's the list.
So the Hall of Famers.
You got to have a Hall of Famer, a freaking first ballot Hall of Famer, just to be above 10. And those guys, like Favre did it once, Young did it once, Peyton did it once, Eli did it twice, I think, or something crazy. Like, it's not easy to do, especially during the age of a rookie wage scale, because as long as there's a great quarterback on a rookie scale, and there's always going to be one or two, always. Now it's Mahomes and Allen.
Right.
You're kind of screwed. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is probably not going to win the Super Bowl this year just because Allen and Mahomes exist. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So here's the angle that really kills this line of thinking, and that's the business angle. The quarterback becomes super marketable for an owner. And, if you have Russell Wilson and you own the Seattle Seahawks, having Russell Wilson and making the playoffs every year is more profitable than having a different quarterback every 4 years and making a couple Super Bowls, maybe, possibly winning one. Right. You just feel that, hey, with Russell Wilson making this much money, we're going to make X amount of money. We're always going to make the playoffs, and there's always a chance
job security.
We can make the Super Bowl,
job security.
Right?
So, for example, like from the Jets' perspective, the Jets should absolutely trade for Deshaun Watson, because they don't have to worry about him, being too expensive to win a Super Bowl. They just went 2-14. They need relevance. They need job security. They need the playoffs. And if it doesn't work, maybe they'll figure it out 5 years from now. But a team like the Jets should absolutely want to give this money to a quarterback.
So a team like the Jets is really super interesting when it comes to Deshaun Watson, right? Because you can do what kind of the Niners did with Jimmy Garoppolo in 2019. And we talked about this, right? Nobody else on the roster was paid. So you had this highly paid player in Garoppolo and then a cheap roster. And the Jets theoretically could pull that off because all their young starter, very good type players like a Marcus May. I'm not sure if Marcus May has been re-signed. Can someone clarify that? But a Quinnen Williams, a Mekhi Becton, all these guys. Denzel Mims came on at the end of the season kind of strong. People really like him there. So you have all these guys who are super cheap. So yeah, Deshaun is very expensive, but you're not paying a premium at any other position. Everybody else is cheap. And then you could have a Super Bowl type roster for Deshaun that way. But then in 2 years, when everybody else has to get paid, then you would be stuck in that same situation. I
got one last thing to say, then we'll move on. For this to work, like to take the Billy Bean Moneyball approach to quarterbacks, I was talking about it with a friend of mine from high school last night, Kevin. Kevin, if you're watching, shout out. What Billy Bean would do is he would draft 2-3 quarterbacks a year, and just say, like, you know what, it's an inexact science. You really don't know who's going to be a great quarterback. Take 2 or 3 a year, give yourself a chance. The problem is you can do that in baseball because there's the minor leagues. And that's what they do. Like, pitchers are just as important as quarterbacks. Pitchers are very important, and they get a lot of money. And so they get drafted in the top 10, but teams don't just throw them out there. They put them in the minors. They develop them, and they draft a whole lot of them. And they say, we'll see who rises to the top. In the NFL, it's like, no, I'm only going to draft a quarterback like in the first round, like once every 15 years. And whoever that guy is has to play right away. And if he fails, he fails. If he succeeds, it's like maybe the NFL should actually invest in some type of a spring league for quarterbacks so you could do something like this and actually develop these guys. I mean, this is way a tangent, but you could actually pull this off if there was a way to develop young quarterbacks, but there just isn't, man. Practice squad, it's hard.
I can't hear you.
You can hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Oh, I can hear you. Hold on. Yeah, leave. All right. Man, that was like the most brilliant thing I ever said, and Vish never heard it. He's never going to hear what I had to say. I think it's pretty smart. I've been pushing for a minor league for football for a long time. You want these young quarterbacks. You can't develop the young quarterbacks. You should be drafting 2 or 3 of them a year. And if you could, and send them to a AAA football, man, there would be much better quarterback play throughout the league. And football would just be more fun in general.
There we go.
Yeah, can you hear me? So how much of that did you hear?
So
I gave my entire pitch for minor league football.
You were talking about your friend Kevin and something about how the baseball has minor leagues. I got lost.
Real quick, I can do it in 10 seconds. Pitchers in baseball, just as important as quarterbacks in football. Pitchers get paid a lot of money. They get drafted high. But the MLB teams don't just take a guy in the top 10 and put him on their team. They put him in the minors. They develop them. And they draft a lot of pitchers, and they figure some will rise to the top, and we don't know which ones it'll be. Imagine if you could do that in football. Draft 3 quarterbacks a year, put them in a spring league, let them develop, and see what happens. It might be a 6th-round pick who's great.
It would be super cool, right? And it would be the NFL would make more money because I'm pretty sure people would watch minor league football if that exists. So, but the problem is there's too much feelings with the NFL, right? Like the Eagles thought they had a quarterback theoretically. People thought they had a quarterback in Carson Wentz.
Right.
They proceeded to draft Jalen Hurts. It ruined Carson Wentz. And now Carson Wentz, it got to the point where they lost Doug Peterson, and Carson Wentz, the moment he got benched, said it doesn't work with him and Doug Peterson and all of that. So I think there's way too many feelings, and you need the alpha mentality with the quarterback. There's too much of that, and that's why
you would have to have like an organizational. You'd have to be like, look, guys, we do not give second contracts to quarterbacks. We just don't do it. It's an organizational philosophy. So we draft 3 a year. Understand if you're getting drafted by us, you're not getting a second deal. So you go on the field to audition yourself to another team. And you know what? If you play really well and have a great career, we might sign you on your 4th contract when you're 37. We're just going to miss your prime because we don't shop. It's like we don't buy new cars. We just shop used. We go, it's like, I'm not going to pay that premium. You know what I mean? I think a team eventually will do that. And, the Patriots might be able to do that with Jimmy G. They might be able to get him to come down a little bit because of how hurt he's been the last few years.
I think that if the Niners cut him, I think they'll sign him for 10 to 12 or 10 to 15 million dollars, and they'll be on their way because they'll be able to retool that roster quickly. But we'll see.
Yeah. Raj says we should make a deal with Trent and sign and trade him to a team like the Bengals for 1-2 first-round picks. It will give us picks and save us cap. We're going to get to Trent Williams. Thank you for the question. Thank you for the donation. I promise we're going to get to Trent Williams. I will not let that one go. Hold on. Jay says, you see Kyle, I don't know what that word is, on Sunday with Jimmy G running the Rams and Watson running the Packers. That's the difference in having a great quarterback or just a good one. Yep, agree, man.
What?
I don't know. I guess he's saying that.
I think he means with Goff running the Rams and Rodgers running the Packers. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. Absolutely not.
Sean, you're the most generous person. Thank you. Grant, we do have that. The problem is the leagues go bankrupt every year or two after starting. That is how we got Brunskill. No, instead of staying a minor league, they try to compete with the NFL. Real quick, right. What I'm saying is those are competing leagues that are
He's saying the NFL creates a league that is a league under the NFL.
The NFL has so much more money than baseball. Baseball invests in their own minor leagues, and the NFL doesn't. They basically just let colleges do it. Like, great. But if they were actually taking an active role in developing young quarterbacks, the product would be so much better. So much better. There should be a spring league that you could throw your 6th-round pick in there. And if he gets hurt, oh, well, it's football. And he was a 6th-round pick. But like a guy like Kellen Mond would have such a better chance to become a starting quarterback in the NFL if he could actually develop after college than if he just had to go be a backup and run a scout team. You know what I'm saying? That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
Because the only guys who really get an opportunity to play in the NFL are guys who were 1st-round picks. Sam Darnold will get every opportunity to play and fail because he was a 1st-round pick. Anyway, James Foster says, what's the knock on Watson coming out of college was INTs on throws down the middle of the field? Okay, let's talk about that right now. The next topic is, why did Deshaun Watson only win 4 games in 2020? And the reason I ask is he's supposed to be the best quarterback in the league or up there. Like, there's nothing he can't do. And I agree that he's extremely good. But I also feel like if you put Russell Wilson on the Texans this year, they win 9 games. And if you put Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady on that team, they win 9 games because they're the elite of the elite. And for Watson to be in the elite, I would expect him to get at least 8. I mean, he had J.J. Watt. So anyway, I don't watch the Texans that much. I catch them on Red Zone and stuff. So Vish, explain to me how this dude went 4-12 this year.
Okay, so I disagree with I agree with that mindset, right? I don't think wins are a quarterback stat, but for the most part, the top guys, the Tom Brady's, the Aaron Rodgers, the Peyton Mannings, the Big Ben Roethlisbergers, the Russell Wilsons, they're in the playoffs every year, and oftentimes it's because it's in spite of a lot of turmoil in their roster, a lot of guys missing in a lot of spots, but they overcome it because they're that good. Okay.
Right. And that's what they're paid to do. I mean, you're paid to overcome that.
I agree. I think that's applicable in Deshaun Watson's case, and I think he would win 9 games with the Houston Texans next year if they re-sign Will Fuller and get a couple pieces on defense. But I don't think it applies to this year. And the reason I don't think it applies to this year is because what happened to the Texans this year was just brutal. So their first 7 games, they played 5 playoff teams out of their 7. Okay, so usually these types of teams, right, they win the games they're supposed to win. That's why they win 10 games. That's why Russell Wilson wins 10 games in spite of their roster. Well, they started off, right, this was a Houston Texans starting schedule. You went to Kansas City, scheduled loss. They're coming off the Super Bowl. Then you had Baltimore, who had arguably the best roster in the NFL. That's what people thought in the preseason. Then you had Pittsburgh, who was flying high. Then you played Minnesota, who was desperate, and they kind of lost in a shootout type game. They whooped Jacksonville, and they ultimately lost to at the time, I think 5-1 Tennessee Titans or 5-0 Tennessee Titans. So they basically ended their season before it started. And what happens with aging veteran teams is, even when you have Deshaun Watson, I mean, you're talking about guys who are 30, 31. They got to think about their next job. They start making business decisions. They're not going to be like the 2017, 2018 Niners where you're throwing out a bunch of undrafted dudes who are just happy to play and they're going to go play their butts off. The Houston Texans fired their coach. They had a lot of changes in their roster. They had all of these problems, and they started off horribly, where their season was done before it started. And I think that's why they went 4-12. I think if you hire a competent coach, let's say they hire Brian Daboll, let's say Deshaun Watson gets appeased and he stays there. Let's say they re-sign Will Fuller, maybe bring in a couple of defensive pieces. They're not going to be a contender because the roster won't be good enough, but I have no doubt that they would go 9-7.
Okay. I just feel like, well, let's break him down like this. I mean, his playing style, I know he's become more of a pocket quarterback. He used to run around a lot. He does fumble a lot. I'm just like, for a quarterback who's elite, it seems like he has holes in his game that maybe Russell Wilson doesn't have. He fumbles. I don't think you can totally absolve him of all the blame. I think he had a hand in this team being what it is. You can't just say he's great. But real quick, hold on. Let me compare him to Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott before this season had never had a losing season. And people were like, yeah, but he was 8-8 last year, and he was cheap. You make him the highest paid quarterback in the league. Why would you expect to win when you went only 8-8 with him when he was cheap? Watson was cheap this year. Watson will be cheap next year. His extension kicks in 2022. So to me, I mean, it seems like you could use the same logic against him. Be like, hey, man, say what you want, but why do we think that he's necessarily going to be this playoff lock every year making 40 when he was, I mean, wasn't a playoff lock making 10?
He was though, right? He made it. They would have. I mean, his rookie season, they went from being a playoff team with him, 19 touchdowns, 5 interceptions in 5 games, and then they fell off and gave. I think who did they trade with at the time? Was it the Cincinnati Bengals? They gave the Cincinnati Bengals a top 5 pick. I want to say they gave somebody a top 5 pick. I don't think it was Cincinnati. Someone please mention it in the comment section. Whoever they traded the next first round pick to for Deshaun Watson, they gave them a top 5 pick. Then his next year, they made the playoffs. His second year, they made the playoffs. His third year. So he's not been that kind of guy. In Dak Prescott's case, the reason people said that is because at the time of Dak Prescott being drafted, though he's been an excellent quarterback, a top 10 type quarterback his entire career, especially the last 2 years, his problem was they had Zeke Elliott. They had 3 Hall of Fame offensive linemen. They went and traded for Amari Cooper. And at the time, they had the best defense in the NFC West. And people said, yeah, Dak, you have every single thing. The offense, like Jason Garrett, isn't great, but he isn't horrible. It's not like the worst play calling. It's okay.
Well, I mean, he's no better than Bill O'Brien.
Sure, right. It's not good play calling. It's fine. It's fine. Sometimes they do something.
It's okay.
Good. Yeah, it's
generic.
Yeah, okay, right. And so everybody looked at, and he was in Dallas, so it got a little extra hype and all of that, and that worked against Dak Prescott.
Both bad organizations.
Yeah, ultimately
Dallas. Yeah.
Ultimately, I think that's what Dak Prescott's problem was. I think he was actually well on his way to a losing season this year because Tyron Smith got hurt early.
He was 2-3. He was 2-3, and that coaching staff is just
right. They had a bad coaching staff. Their defense was horrible. They were starting undrafted offensive linemen. So it was Dak. Zeke Elliott has clearly lost all type of explosiveness. He wasn't pass blocking well, which used to be what he was best at.
Right. And he was fumbling.
Right. He's fumbling. So you had Dak, Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, and Michael Gallup. That was going to be their entire offense, basically. And I think Dak Prescott was well on his way to having a great statistical season that ultimately led it to them, the Dallas Cowboys, going 6-10. So
if you're a one-dimensional offense with shaky pass protection, quarterback's going to get hurt in the NFL. And you just hope that it's not as gruesome as it was with Dak, and it was very gruesome. So they put him in a bad situation. I guess it's just, being so invested in Zeke Elliott. He's old now in football year. All right, let's move on. And that's enough Deshaun Watson for today. We'll probably talk Deshaun tomorrow again too, though. But Drew Brees is retiring. We've seen the entire Drew Brees career, and Vish and I have been talking about this for months. Where does he rank in the pantheon of all-time great quarterbacks? I bring it up. Who would you rather have, Drew Brees or Steve Young? But let's approach this a different way. Is Drew Brees a top 10 quarterback all time in your opinion, Vish?
No. I don't think he is. I don't think he is. The conversation we just had about Deshaun Watson with top 10 quarterbacks, how many times did Drew Brees go 8-8 in his prime? Drew Brees has been the kind of quarterback where I really think he's great. Okay, let's first bring out the superlatives. All-time great quarterback, first ballot Hall of Famer, one of the best quarterbacks ever, one of the smartest quarterbacks ever.
Yeah, probably one of the top 15 quarterbacks ever.
Absolutely. Not close. Yes, he's absolutely in the conversation. And he's right around the conversation of top 10 because this is mostly just people's opinions. And if you have Drew Brees in the top 10, it's not stupid. It's smart. He's good.
Borderline. Yeah, no doubt.
Right.
Yeah. Not top 5.
I don't think he's top 5.
No.
But here's where – and he didn't make the playoffs, right, in his prime a few times, right? And they had horrible defenses. They did, but that also helped his accumulation of counting statistics, which is his real only claim to fame. One of the smartest quarterbacks ever, but a guy who, when you break down his playoff performances, like he was bad yesterday, but he was horrible versus Minnesota the year before. A game against the Rams was a bad call away from people actually talking about the fact that Drew Brees was terrible in that playoff game. The Minnesota Miracle game, he was horrible in the first half. The Beastquake game, he was terrible. He
hasn't done anything since that Super Bowl he won when I was in college.
Did he throw 2 picks or 3 picks in the 2011 shootout game versus the 49ers?
A few.
They had 5 turnovers in the first half. One was a special teams. Deshaun Goldson had an interception. Dante Whitner had the fumble on Pierre Thomas. I think he threw 1 more interception. So he threw 2 interceptions in that game, which usually your superstar quarterback knows better than to turn the ball over twice in a playoff game of that magnitude on the road. And frankly, the thing that's benefited Drew Brees is playing in the dome, which with the schematic advantage that Sean Payton gives him. If he played in an offense that didn't adjust to the fact
Pittsburgh,
that he's had
Pittsburgh,
right.
If he had to play his career on the Steelers,
problem is, right? We saw the Steelers try to take the Drew Brees approach with Ben Roethlisberger this year. Just a million short passes. Never throw the ball down the field. And if you have Sean Payton scheming it up and you're that creative, and of course Drew Brees is better mentally than Ben Roethlisberger, so that helps. But if you have Sean Payton scheming it up, you're going to be able to throw short passes all the time and still be successful. Right. The Pittsburgh Steelers just tried running the same few route concepts and just throwing the ball short, and Ben playing a little backyard football, and it didn't work. So I think he's a tad overrated and it's overstated just based on statistics, just because he's the only quarterback all time that we evaluate solely based on statistics. Right. In my lifetime, when we talk about the top 10 quarterbacks of all time, we talk about two things. We talk about winning legacy. So that's the Montanas, right? The 4 Super Bowls, even though the counting numbers aren't as impressive as, say, Dan Marino. Elway is kind of in the same boat, and Elway actually falls into the other category, which is physical talent. And that's Elway, Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre, just guys that do stuff that we've never seen, and that's why they won MVPs, Marino, and they just make plays that I don't know which of those two categories Drew Brees falls into. He's physically not the most impressive, and his winning resume isn't something that's fantastic. So
he doesn't have the strongest arm.
Right.
He's not particularly mobile. He's not particularly big. He had the shoulder surgery. He played in a dome. It seems to me that, he wasn't even the best in his era. Brady was better. Peyton Manning was better. Rodgers was better. He was the fourth best quarterback of his era. And when you compare him to quarterbacks, Roethlisberger was better.
Because I remember seasons like 2013 where if we said top 10 quarterbacks, top 5 quarterbacks, Brees sometimes wasn't in the conversation. Sometimes people would throw in Matt Ryan, Cam Newton for a couple years in there, but it was always Brady, Peyton, and Rodgers.
He's probably the best fantasy quarterback of his era, but not a top 4 quarterback of his era, and borderline top 5. And when you compare him to quarterbacks from other eras like Steve Young, another thing that Drew Brees benefited from is how wide open the middle of the field is. You can't touch the quarterbacks. He doesn't have the arm to get it outside like even Steve Young could have. So he benefited from that. There was no Ronnie Lott to take away the throws to Marcus Colston and Jimmy Graham. You could do that all day. And then also you can't touch the quarterback. Steve Young got pulverized in the NFL and had to retire because of concussions. If he could have played in this era where you can't touch him, and he could have played for Sean Payton his whole career. He played for some really good coaches too. But I'm saying Steve Young would have put up better numbers. He would have played just as long. You put him in this era on that team. Yeah, Steve Young was better than Drew Brees.
He also what Drew Brees' claim to fame is he's one of the most accurate quarterbacks of all time, which I do agree with, and he's one of the smartest quarterbacks of all time, which I do agree with. The thing with Steve Young is that he was more gifted physically, and I think that he actually ended up doing more with less. I didn't watch Steve Young, but from what I understand, his offensive lines his last few years in the NFL were just horrible. And he used to get hit a lot, and they used to win basically because they had Steve Young. Well, Drew Brees, the last 4 or 5 years of his career, he's had a loaded roster. They've had a top 10 defense and a top 10 offense in terms of weapons. They've had
great offensive line,
a top 3 offensive line, and they've had all of that. And, Brees never won with the bad roster and went to the playoffs the way some of these other quarterbacks have done it. So if we're going to start parsing, I'm not into the quarterback wins, but if you're comparing quarterback wins on equal footing, like Aaron Rodgers going to the playoffs, I think, was it 2014? Where he took the roster that was not that good, and they went. You could do any of those years with Mike McCarthy that he took to the playoffs. Peyton Manning, how many different teams and how many different types of teams with how many different types of coaches did he take to the playoffs? Brady, how many times have we sat back and said, dang, all they have at receiver is that small little slot white receiver. So you can say that
they blamed Brady for 2019 in New England when it was so clearly that the rest of the team was like 4-12 without. What did they go this year? 6-10, 5-11,
6-10, and Cam Newton had the same problem, but nobody's giving Cam that excuse.
Right,
the receivers were pathetic.
Yes.
And so with Drew Brees, I feel like it's because he's such a good guy, right? He has such a clean image, except for the controversial thing he had to say at the beginning of this year.
True, but he came through for that city when Katrina happened.
Right.
A lot of native New Orleans love him. You saw what Tyrann Mathieu said about him.
Right.
He means a lot. He's been there forever. That team was a joke until he showed up. a joke. They were the Aints forever. That was a little bit before your time.
Yeah, no, I mean, I remember in 2006, Drew Brees and Sean Payton showing up, and suddenly the Saints are good from the second pick to getting Reggie Bush. That was insane.
What? Yeah.
He's 100% all-time great quarterback, great career, Hall of Famer for sure, first ballot Hall of Famer. But I just think that his career and his achievement has been a little overstated compared to the quarterbacks of his time. I don't think he's better than Rodgers. I don't think he's better than Peyton. I don't think he's better than Brady. Those are for sure. I think the reason I say Big Ben is better, it's not because, Big Ben is definitively better than Drew Brees the way Aaron Rodgers is definitively better than Drew Brees. It's because I think it's a lot closer conversation than people would like to admit. Like, I think it's automatically set in stone that Big Ben is just one of those first ballot Hall of Fame quarterbacks like Eli, and he's not at the same level as the Peyton. Brees gets put into that tier of Peyton. The
way I look at it, though, is just I think Ben could have done what Brees did in New Orleans. I think he could have done that. I don't think Brees could have done what Roethlisberger did in Pittsburgh. Outdoors, less sophisticated passing offense, much more having to throw down the field. He couldn't have done it. He couldn't have done it.
And Ben, Ben, like the thing was Ben did have the steel curtain at the beginning of his career, and that helped him win 2 Super Bowls for sure. But what he did, we've never seen Drew Brees do anything like what Big Ben Roethlisberger did at the end of in a playoff game at the end of that Super Bowl, the throw to Santonio Holmes. Oh my God, the drive to lead them down, the back and forth in that game. And then the last 4, 5, 6 years before the reemergence of this defense, which really came when they traded for Minkah Fitzpatrick, they had a horrible secondary, and their defense always was giving up points to everybody, and Big Ben would take them to the playoffs because they were that explosive on offense. And I think the other thing that Big Ben doesn't get enough credit to is the Steelers are a fantastic organization at drafting receivers, but a lot of these receivers' success is due to Big Ben Roethlisberger's play style. The fact that he's able to stand in the pocket for so long, so fearlessly, and keep plays alive and throw the football down the field constantly.
He makes 4 or 5 receivers deep threats because they can run double and triple moves. Yes.
Right. And, and people like Mike Wallace. Mike Wallace got 2 big contracts, right? Mike Wallace never did anything away from Big Ben. Santonio Holmes wasn't that good on the Jets away from Big Ben. I think that it was the 2 guys I would say were absolutely fantastic were Emmanuel Sanders and Antonio Brown. I think the rest of them were all really good, but they definitely were enhanced by the fact that they played with Big Ben Roethlisberger.
All right, let's take a couple questions. Sean says, I don't get why everyone is surprised by Jackson's fall off. We saw the same exact thing with Cap under Roman. Every year Roman declines, it's Roman. You know what, Sean? I agree with you. 100%. I've covered Roman a long time, and what he does well. And I think he's good for a quarterback who's just getting his feet underneath him in the league and needs to be an athlete. But I think these quarterbacks outgrow him. And I really think the Ravens should consider moving on from Roman because that offense is just it ain't good enough. It's a good running game, but I think Lamar Jackson has graduated and he can do a little bit more as a passer than what Roman asks.
They need to bring in some sort of pass game coordinator that keeps the concepts either all vertical, all short for Lamar, but is creative with them. Greg Roman is –
That's what they did at Stanford.
Yeah,
that's what they did at Stanford. There was a divisional –
you pointed it out.
David Shaw, who was the passing game coordinator, yes. And, actually on the Niners, the pass game coordinator was Johnny Morton. Problem is he stinks. He just stinks.
And Jeep Chris had a hand in –
He was red zone. Zone.
Yep. Right. So, and then the other thing I think they need to do for Lamar Jackson is give him a wide receiver. Like, are we going to act like just Hollywood Brown at 5'8", 185 pounds is the right type of receiver that Lamar Jackson needs? Lamar Jackson is really accurate short to intermediate. That's his game. He's super accurate short to intermediate. Throws with a lot of touch and a lot of accuracy. And that slingshot release is a really quick release, actually. So he flicks it out there really fast. So I think that they need to get him some sort of number 1 receiver with a big body. And, the other thing is, I'm going to just...
if he had A.J. Brown instead of freaking Hollywood Brown.
If he had Deebo Samuel.
Right. Either one.
Yeah.
Either one. Yes.
And the other thing I wanted to say about Lamar Jackson is people think that he's a running quarterback. And I wanted to dispel that number because when I think of a running quarterback, I think of what Colin Kaepernick was in his first couple years with the 49ers. A guy who drops back, looks at one receiver. When it's not open, he's looking to bolt out of the pocket. Watch Lamar Jackson play. When it's a design run play, he's a running back. But when it's a design pass play, Lamar Jackson actually maybe stays in the pocket too long. Sometimes he stays in the pocket too long and he's waiting on receivers to get open. He's not just running out there trying to play backyard football and run around and make it happen with his legs. So I just wanted to say that. And I agree with
call Sean that it's like, hey, maybe it's time to get rid of Greg Roman. To me, he's like a JV offensive coordinator. He's good for certain teams and certain quarterbacks, but I think the Ravens and Lamar Jackson have just graduated beyond. They don't need him anymore. He's holding them back. And you're right, he doesn't improve. That he's kind of like a gimmick. He's like a more sophisticated Chip Kelly. Shane is out. Might be late on the news. Yeah, Shane is out. Shane is out. I'd like to think that I contributed to that one. Jeez. No, more likely it was Jimmy Garoppolo. Okay, let's get into some in or outs. We probably need to pick up the pace a little bit. We got about 6 topics left, and we can go for another half hour, though. We really have no – we can go.
I don't really have commitments today.
All right. So first one, in or out, and we've been doing this topic, but I haven't done it with Vish yet. So let's do it like this. Go through some players on the team, about 5 or 6, starting with the nickelback, K'Waun Williams. Is he coming back or is he out?
Okay, so I think the thing I do want to say is with all these in and outs, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to speculate based on how much I think the guy is going to get offered, and if he's going to get offered too much money, and if he's worth that too much money. I think K'Waun Williams is going to get offered a reasonable contract, especially by the New York Jets, and I don't think he's worth it. And here's why. So, Grant, who did you say in camp this year was the cornerback that struggled the most? You reported this. You stressed on this. Who really struggled in man coverage?
Jamar Taylor.
Jamar Taylor, correct?
Jamar Taylor, yes.
So Jamar Taylor played 8 games for the 49ers at nickelback this year. K'Waun Williams played 8 games for the 49ers at nickelback, okay?
Neither one is good in man-to-man coverage, honestly. Neither one.
So
they're both little.
Their numbers, right? So Jamar Taylor was targeted 17 times. He had 2 interceptions, gave up 13 completions at a rating of 69.1. K'Waun Williams was targeted 20 times. He gave up 15 receptions at a completion percentage of 75%, had 0 interceptions, okay? So the numbers are fairly similar, and here's why, okay? The reason that these nickelbacks on the 49ers look so good is because of the safeties. Jimmy Ward and Jaquiski Tartt are the actual nickelbacks on this team. They do the covering in man-to-man coverage, which allows K'Waun Williams to be the playmaker and blitz and cause these fumbles. And yeah, he's a phenomenal blitzer. He's a really good tackler, but his job is done by Jimmy Ward. And, Jimmy Ward, then everyone says, Jimmy Ward has no numbers. No numbers. Well, let Jimmy Ward be the blitzer and make K'Waun Williams guard in one-on-one, and look at Jimmy Ward's numbers, and K'Waun Williams is probably getting beat a lot. So
Jimmy Ward won't get to the quarterback because K'Waun Williams gets beat too quickly.
Right. Yes. So for that reason, I just think that I think K'Waun Williams is a really good player. I think his story is awesome. I think he's a really good tackler. He forces fumbles. He's a hard-nosed, gritty player who does have the same injury issues as the other players that get for K'Waun Williams that never gets mentioned, but it gets mentioned with other players. I do want to say that. And ultimately, I just think that he is someone that they can replace, and they would replace as long as Jimmy Ward is the free safety for this
team. They've done it over and over and over again, and that's the main point. As long as Jimmy Ward is the free safety, they proved that a guy like Jamar Taylor can do the job as well, if not better, for stretches than K'Waun Williams. It's an important position in the Niners defense, but he's this wild card. Basically, he's Jamal Adams. They use him the way the Seahawks use Jamal Adams, which is you can't cover anyone. We don't trust you in the middle of the field. We don't trust you in man-to-man coverage. There's not that much we can really freaking do with you, but you're a hell of a blitzer. I mean, honestly, you're the best pass rusher on our team, so we're going to blitz you often. And the only way we can do that is because Bobby Wagner can cover and KJ Wright can cover, and we got guys. Same thing with the Niners. So it's useful, but you don't want to be spending Jamal Adams money on that. on that.
Right. KJ Wright does a lot of the dirty work for their defense. And KJ Wright hasn't gotten credit for 10 years for how good he's been. And that's because when you do what Jimmy Ward and Jaquiski Tartt have to do for this defense, you don't accumulate statistics. And it's not because, they're bad players. It's because their job doesn't allow them to be able to be in positions to make play after play because they're locked up in man coverage, which doesn't put them around the football. So is K'Wan Williams a really good player? Yes. Is he going to be worth the contract I think the Jets will dole out? No, I don't think the Niners should even consider paying the farm to sign him because they just need to find another nickelback who's smart enough to be good in zone coverage, tackles well, and you can blitz him. And I think that you can draft those guys often in the 5th round. I think DJ Reed would have been more than capable at doing the same exact job if in the case that K'Wan Williams walked this year because Jimmy Ward does the tough part of being a nickelback, and that's covering man-to-man.
Also, one final point, the whole way that they use K'Wan Williams as this wild card blitzer that the offense isn't expecting and doesn't account for, that's Robert Saleh's signature. That's his thing that he's been doing for 2 years. That may not be what Demeco Ryans wants to do. He may have a different vision for the nickelback. He may want to blitz Jimmy Ward. Who knows? So, yeah, I don't think K'Wan Williams is coming back.
Right. And, if you notice, Robert Saleh loves that blitz because after K'Wan went down, after Jamar Taylor went down, when they brought Dante Johnson in, they started blitzing Jimmy Ward a bit more and gave him a couple of pass rush attempts because they love that blitz, and he was the only one healthy enough to do it.
And also that nickel blitz coming from the defense's left and the offense's right ended up being Robert Saleh's final solution to containing the mobile quarterback. Honestly, that was the last thing he figured out in his tenure with the Niners. That was his kryptonite because the whole rush 4 play zone is great against pocket quarterbacks, not as great against mobile quarterbacks. Because the mobile quarterbacks break the pocket. There's always one gap, and then zone becomes man, and you're done. So by bringing that blitz off this side, it forces it takes away that last gap. It's harder to break out of the pocket. If you do break out of the pocket, you got to go away from your throwing arm. It was brilliant. So that's his thing.
I agree. So ultimately I'm totally with you there.
Yeah. And they can get undrafted guys. They can get round 5 picks to do that. Let's move on to Tartt. You referenced him in the K'Wan section that it's not just Jimmy Ward, but also Tartt, because Tartt is a hell of a player in man-to-man coverage, always has been. So played 7 games this year, which is a good and a bad thing in the sense that the Niners really have been signing too many injured players, but it makes them affordable.
So,
Is he in or out?
Yeah, so I'm in on him, and that's only because I think he's going to be affordable. And I think he's going to be affordable because he's had the injury issue in the past. There's no two ways of talking about it.
How much can he really ask for?
Right. He's missed games. So because of that, I'm in on it. And I'm thinking because Jimmy Ward had the same injury problem, right? When he was signed, everybody wanted Earl Thomas. They paid Jimmy Ward 1 year, $4 million, which was one of the better decisions they've made in free agency as an organization. I'm thinking they could do the same thing with Jaquiski Tartt. Hope he stays healthy. Hope maybe it has to be a bit more than $4 million because he's a bit more accomplished than Jimmy Ward was at the end of 2018 because Jimmy Ward didn't really have a positional home. So he didn't have the opportunity to accumulate.
Give him 5. Give him 5.
Right. He didn't. 5. Right.
Yeah.
But Tartt, I think maybe $5-6 million 1 year, and you bring him in because I think that I think based on what I've seen, I'm not convinced that you can go into a season starting Tarvarius Moore at safety. I don't know what the veteran safety market is like. I think that they're best bringing Tartt back, sticking with the Tartt Jimmy Ward combo at least for 1 more year while they fill other holes on this roster.
And explain to the people watching, because people most lay people watch hey, Tarvarius Moore, he's making plays, he's flying around. What is the difference between what the Niners ask Tartt to do and what the Niners ask Moore to do?
So I think that the big thing is that Tarvarius Moore's assignments are simplified, and it's because Tarvarius Moore, as we've seen, busts
assignments.
He misses assignments and he busts coverages. So for that,
Jimmy Ward have everything on their plate, right?
Right.
Because
so the thing that I think works against both Jimmy Ward and Tartt is because they both have no real weakness as a player. Like something you can point to. Are they not proficient tacklers? No, they're very good tacklers.
Yeah.
Oh, are they bad in man-to-man? No, they're really good in man-to-man. Are they bad in zone? No, they have good eyes. They study a lot and all of those things. And for that reason,
smart?
Right. So for that reason, what happens to both of them is that it's okay, these guys can't do this assignment, but Ward and Tart can do it. So we'll just make Ward and Tart take care of those couple things, and we'll let these guys play free and fast so they can't do that. What they did with Tarvarius Moore is they did the opposite. They made other guys take on a bigger load, and they gave Tarvarius Moore more simpler assignments, which then ultimately put him around the ball and allowed him to make plays more. But I think if they want to be multiple in all those things, they can't start Tarvarius Moore ultimately. And I see this, they aren't ball hawks. Well, explain, besides Ed Reed, in my lifetime, I'm not sure exactly what you would constitute and define as a ball hawk. Like,
that's a rare skill.
Because Minkah Fitzpatrick is allowed to pick off crossers and they make the backside corner when they play single high safety defense, chase and take the deep zone, does that make him a ball hawk? Like, I would argue
put in position to make plays in ways that the other ones aren't.
Right. I mean, he is a playmaker, right? Because he intercepts those passes. But I would argue if you take a very good player like Jimmy Ward, not an average player, take a very good player like Jimmy Ward, and you ask him to do those same type of things, he would have similar ball production. And that's why, like, go back and watch Jimmy Ward in college. Like, the people thought this guy could run around and make – John Gruden compared him to Earl Thomas. So
true, and he did pick off like 10 passes his final year at Northern Illinois. Final thing I want to say real quick about Jaquiski Tartt. Look, if the Niners can get him back on a 1-year deal for $4 million, $5 million, I think that would be just wonderful. It would be terrific, and I'd support it. But they may have some competition. Even though he missed 9 games last year, I'm sure Joe Woods and the Browns would just freaking love him. And they probably, I don't know what their cap situation is, but they have a much cheaper quarterback, so I think it'd probably be easier for them to figure that out. There's also other teams that are good, like Baltimore. Teams that run a lot of man coverage because they pressure would really like a guy like Tart. So he may have to take a discount to come home, and I don't know if he wants to do that.
Yeah, I first never tell players to take discounts. I don't believe in that. Get whatever you can. The other thing is there's very few safeties like him in the NFL that you can say, well, regardless of what our scheme is, regardless of whatever he can do all those things, right? Like Jamal Adams, Seattle had to adjust what they do and make him a blitzer and all of that. And he's the same exact player that he was with the Jets, but somehow his perception went from being the best safety in the NFL with the Jets to being a guy who can't cover anybody, can't do this, he sucks, he's an edge rusher, he's an outside linebacker. No, he's a really good player. He's a really good blitzer. He just does some things really well and he struggles at some things. And as long as you can acknowledge that, then you don't ever reach this point where he goes to either being the best safety in the NFL to being, oh, he's so overrated, blah, blah, blah.
There's never been a safety that's had his type of pass rushing production. So he's doing something well.
Yeah, of course. He's explosive. He's a great tackler.
And also a thing about him too, a kind of guy who can get you 8-9 sacks a year and not cost you 11% of your cap. I know they're saying he's very expensive, but honestly, I don't mind paying top dollar for a safety, a corner. The only 2 positions that are getting crazy in the NFL are D-end and quarterback. Those are the ones where it's like, do you really want to pay Joey Bosa 12% of your cap? Like, no, absolutely not. So, I mean, paying DeForest Buckner what he wants, that's not going to cripple you, man. That's 9% of your cap. He's probably worth it. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
The bottom line, just to put a bow on this conversation, I'm 100. As long as the price is doable and he's not getting way too much money on other places, I'm 100% in on Tart. Just because, again, he does so much for this defense that goes unnoticed because he's so good at so many different things.
And as you said at the beginning, the fact that he's been hurt might open the door for the Niners to give him a competitive offer the way they did with Jimmy Ward. Under normal circumstances, 1 year, $5 million might not get it done, but maybe Tart gets that and says, you know what? I'll come back on this team. We'll run it back. We'll be a top 5 defense. I'll be healthy. And then next year I'll get paid and I can stay here and go somewhere else. It's interesting. He might actually be coming back, but there's a lot of other factors at play. So let's move on. Another guy the Niners have to figure out and who might be probably is a more important person to resign. Well, we can talk about that. Jason Verrett. Is he in or is he out?
Yeah, so he has to be one of the two most important positions because we have to take the premium of positional value into account. And Jason Verrett plays, in my opinion, one of the 4 premium positions in football, which is cornerback. Yep. And, I thought he played fantastic last year. He was really, really good. And it's not like K'Wan Williams where he can say other people were helping out doing his assignments and stuff. No, they just asked Jason Verrett to do a lot of different things and cover a lot of different people. And he was fantastic at it. So I'm
Fabulous.
absolutely in on re-signing Jason Verrett. I think it's really important. I'm not over, like, I don't think paying
too.
$8 million and $9 million for a cornerback that's playing like a top level cornerback is too much money.
It's a bargain.
I agree.
It's a bargain. I mean, honestly, you could be paying Ramsey's making $20 million a year, and he's worth it. He is that good. I wouldn't pay him 25, but 20, yeah, no, I think that's actually fair. So Jason Verrett at 9, hell yes, gotta get him.
Yeah,
gotta get him.
And the Rams are also a zone coverage team technically, right? They play a lot of quarters coverage. That's their go-to coverage. Well, why can they do that, and why can teams still not beat them with a lot of quarters beaters and stuff? Because oftentimes they can just say, Jalen Ramsey, it's one side of the field, you got it. We'll play zone everywhere else. You just take your guy, and that's half the field that's cut off. And I think that's really valuable. And, given that the Niners have so much uncertainty too in terms of their backups for cornerback and all of that, they got to bring him back and pay whatever he asks. Whatever he asks, pay it. I'm in on it.
So that's very interesting. So far, we have both agreed that K1 should go, but Tart should come back on a 1-year, $5 million deal if he's amenable, if he agrees to that. And Jason Verrett should come back. I would offer him 3 years, 30. Exactly what the Niners offered Jimmy Ward. I don't know if it would get it. For Ward, it was 3 years, 28.5. You think 3 years, 30 gets it done for Verrett?
Yeah, I'd do it. 100%. I would do it. If that's the deal, 100% in. Okay. I mean, 3 years, 28, I thought was a bargain for Jimmy Ward, given all the things he does. And it's looking like a bargain based on how he played last year, this year, and the fact that he took less money to stay here and not go to Oakland and all of that. So because of that, I would 100% do that for Jason Verrett.
Yeah, and if you could go into next season saying, well, we got Verrett, Ward, Tart, Mosley, that's a hell of a secondary.
That's
now you
fantastic.
don't have to take a cornerback in round 1. Now you can do whatever the hell you want to do. That's a fantastic secondary.
Now
they can play zone.
Right, and now you can take a chance on a 4th-round corner with nice physical traits that you think you could develop.
Exactly. Okay, so let's move on. We've just said Tart should be in, Verrett should be in. Only problem is the Niners don't have a lot of cap space, mostly because of Jimmy Garoppolo, who I have predicted isn't going to be on this team next year. Maybe that's how they figure out how to keep everyone. But the thing is, Trent Williams is going to be very expensive too. I don't think people understand. People look at the number, what he's going to be making, and I don't think they really get it because the cap fluctuates. It doesn't really mean anything. You got to look at the percentages. And when he gets this extension, he's going to be in 11, 12% territory. He's going to be in Hall of Fame quarterback territory. And you know what? Maybe he deserves it, man. He's a Hall of Fame left tackle, and that's a great position. All I know is making less this year, that offensive line still stunk. And if you pay him that money, I don't know if you can get Jason Verrett or Tart. Now you got to start working. It's kind of like the same thing that the Niners had with Buckner last year. Yeah, he's great, but if you bring him back, how many people do you want to let go? And the only issue is with Williams is that he's even more expensive. Plus, he's older.
Okay, so in regards to Buckner, the reason I think I would pay Trent Williams is just because he plays a premium position and you can't find anyone to replace. Okay, so that's one part of it. And number 2, and here's the thing with Trent Williams and the reason why I think, though in theory, what you're saying sounds right, like all the reasons you outline, like, yeah, that gives a little caution in the wind and all of that. And the reason I would still say, no, you got to pay him is because of the way they got him, what they gave up to get him. They can't do the Emmanuel Sanders thing all over again, where you gave up 2 picks to get him and then you lose him and then you don't have 2 picks and now you have to give up 3 to replace Brandon Ayuk. They can't do that. They're not going to find – Brandon Ayuk was a better Emmanuel Sanders this season, and he has a limitless upside and all of that. But here's the problem, and it's the same thing I bring up when we talk Matthew Stafford all the time, because even at, 32, they're still not – you're not going to find many left tackles that can do all the things that Trent Williams does. And from a pass protection,
he's the best. He's the best. I'm not saying he's not. He's the best. Right? And you pay him for that.
Right. The run blocking, I think, is what people totally disregard, because the stuff he does in run blocking, because of how athletic he is totally different from what the other top dog left tackles are doing. Because he's just a freak athlete where you can make him run like 5 yards down the field and he can knock out a linebacker with a block. So
those left tackles are paid for their pass protection. Whatever they give you in run blocking is extra.
Right. His explosion, his speed, his power, everything is just really special. I think ultimately because of what they gave up and all of that, and the fact that you can't just go into the draft and say, we're going to pick Javon Kinlaw, we're going to pick another Hall of Fame type left tackle or a left tackle that we're convinced is going to be really good. Because I think besides Sewell in this draft, there's nobody that's being regarded as the franchise type left tackle. Last year, there were 4. This year, there's nobody being regarded that way, and because of that, I think you got to stick with Trent Williams.
What I look at it is like in the NFL, the only time you pay a non-quarterback more than 10% of your cap is if you think that player might be the greatest player of all time at his position. Like I understand the Rams giving Aaron Donald what they give him. He deserves it, and he is the greatest defensive tackle of all time. Keep him. He makes his impact every game. Is Trent Williams the greatest left tackle of all time? Some people talk about him that way. Maybe he is worth it. I just feel like either him or Jimmy G has to go. You can't have them both. You can't have Jimmy G making 26.9 and Trent Williams making 24. You can't have 27% of your cap tied up into 2 players who can't play 16 or don't play 16 games a year usually. Or even if they do play 16 games a year, it's too much. So if they get rid of Jimmy G and they go with Watson, or who's cheap for another year, or a rookie, then you absolutely can afford to splurge on your left tackle, but you got to choose one or the other. And I guess you choose the guy who's really good as opposed to the quarterback who's overpaid.
And this is why I think their decision-making this offseason is going to be so important in their evaluating their future, because let's say they keep Jimmy, they pay Trent, and that means Tart walks and K'Wan Williams walks and Kyle Juszczyk, who we're going to discuss next, walks, and they lose all these people. Like, because Jimmy is not a certainty to be the quarterback even the next year in 2022, and you keep him, it makes it really difficult to watch the other players walk, because you want those other players, when you do move off of Jimmy, and go young at quarterback or go with somebody else at quarterback. So, yeah, I think, again, this offseason is going to be super interesting. The Niners got like 25 decisions that are going to make or break Kyle Shanahan's future for the next 4 years. I'm glad that all I get to do is just sit here and talk about his decisions that he has to make and evaluate the pros and cons rather than actually having to pull the trigger.
Me too. Sean has a follow-up question. It's a very good one. Isn't there a way that around the cap with Trent and others by giving salary in signing bonus? Yes. But here's the thing, because I know you're going to say the same thing. We're on the same wavelength here. Yes, you can give them the signing bonus. Yes, you can backload the deal. They did that with Armstead. They do that with all. Eventually, you get to a point where you're giving Armstead 9.5% of your cap, Williams 12% of your cap. It catches up to you eventually, but you can make it work in the short term. Yeah,
No, you can't even do that with Trent Williams. You can do that with extensions. Extensions, you can do that type of stuff. This is an open market free agent. You got to pay whatever the top dollar is. That's what you're going to have to do. You got to pay the big time premium. You're not going to be.
I'm just saying, like, theoretically, you could give him like a $70 million signing bonus and probably structure his contract in a way where the cap hit year one isn't that hard, even though you're giving out a ton of cash.
But it's going to catch up to you sometime.
Yes, it will. That's the whole point. It's what they did with Armstead. And eventually, 2 years down the line, Armstead's expensive. Williams is expensive. Watson's expensive.
The way the Niners have handled it, because Parag is brilliant, is that they cut the guy before the money becomes a problem, so they never have that salary cap issue, which in theory is like fantastic, right? You never have a salary cap issue, but it sucks, because if the guy is never living up to the point where you're paying him the premium and you're just getting rid of him, you're trading him, cutting him, that means you never had a really good player. And even though you didn't pay him too much money and all that, you were smart that way, it's hurting your team.
I don't know what James Foster's question is. Deion Jordan, Solomon Thomas.
He's asking you to pick one between Deion Jordan, Solomon Thomas, and Ronnie Blair. I'm going to pick Deion Jordan.
Yeah, I'm going to pick the one guy who hasn't torn his ACL.
Yeah,
right. Has he?
No, I don't think so.
He played pretty well this year.
Yeah, he's healthy. Right now, Deion Jordan is healthy. Solomon Thomas is not. And Ronnie Blair, I have no clue what's going on with his knee.
And again, to me, what I see with Kosarik is his value is expressed on guys like Deion Jordan, not necessarily guys like Javon Kinlaw. These first-round picks, I guess, are either good or they're not. But these undrafted guys are these busts, these disappointments. All of a sudden, Kosarik gets them at least playing at a competent level.
Jordan Willis.
He's great at that.
Yeah. Jordan Willis, Deion Jordan both played okay for the Niners. It's crazy because, like, it's tough to credit Kasarik for Ndamukong Suh because Ndamukong Suh was the best player in college football when he played at Nebraska,
he's a notorious underachiever in the NFL. Notorious. He's like the Randy Moss of defensive tackles. Like, he plays when he wants to. But you can give him credit for Kerry Hyder, Deion Jordan, I mean, Kevin Givens, absolutely. He's terrific. He's definitely worth it.
Tavius Street is a guy that's played really nicely for them the last 5-6 games of the year.
Okay, we got 2 more topics, and then we'll take a couple questions, and then we'll go. In or out, Kyle Juszczyk.
Okay, I think I'm out, and it's only because I think Juszczyk is going to get offered a lot of money from one of the Shanahan disciples in the NFL. There's 14 teams running the Shanahan offense next year, and I think a lot of them study Kyle a lot. They look at Kyle and they want to do it. Yeah, and if you're the Jets, you have a ton of cap room. Why not bring Juszczyk in the same fashion that the 49ers brought Juszczyk in 2017 and instill your offense and the culture and all that, right? Yeah.
He not only he can lead by example, but he can explain it. He's so smart. He's he's smarter than Jimmy Garoppolo. Right. He is very in tune with what you're trying to do. Also, I think what Saleh looks at that Jets job is kind of similar as like the Niners job 4 years down the line. It's a blank slate.
Right. He can do everything.
Whatever he wants. So bringing a guy like Juszczyk for the offense, bringing a guy like Sherman maybe for the defense, just for their mind as much as for their abilities.
Right. Yeah. And Juszczyk, the thing for the 49ers is he plays I think what percentage of the snaps does he play?
35%, something
it's a
like
low
that.
percentage. Yeah. And
he plays on first down.
Right.
He plays on first down. Yeah.
Right. And he's a great run blocker. He's a really great player. He's really smart and everything. But I think that you can take the individual things that he does and replace them with guys who are currently on the roster, who are for a much cheaper price. And ultimately, that's why, as good as he is and as valuable as he may be, Kyle can make this offense work without Kyle Juszczyk. In Atlanta, who was their fullback? In Washington, who was their fullback?
I remember who it was. Hold on. No. In Atlanta, it was DeMarco. Something DeMarco.
Yeah.
Because that's my last name. That's my Italian last name. DeMarco.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's my mom's mom was originally DeMarco. Anyway, so yeah, I'm with you. Also,
and then Chris Cooley, right?
Oh yeah,
Chris Cooley was used in Washington, but then they had Vonta Leach who was a Pro Bowler in Houston. But ultimately, all of those things, I think he can make it work with Hokett, and Jalen Hurd can fill in the receiving portion of it. Ross Dwelly can fill in here and there, and then you get George Kittle back. And you re-sign Trent Williams. The run game is going to work regardless.
Yeah, also, I think the thing with Juszczyk is he's a fullback. I don't think you want just a fullback anymore. And the way the Niners, I've talked about this before, but they use him just as much at tight end this year as they use him at fullback. He was constantly either in line or at H-back in motion and stuff. And it seems like the evolution of the Niners running game is to use more 2 tight end looks than classic 21 personnel looks because of the way that defenses have evolved to shut down the outside stretch zone game. I mean, the Niners do a lot of running. I mean, if basically what they're doing is if you're going to set the edge, then we're going to kick that guy out with 2 tight ends and run inside. And that's what they do. So it seems like that's the next evolution. That's why they got Charlie Werner. And they want a guy who can play a lot of tight end and play a little fullback, not a guy who can play a lot of fullback and play a little tight end.
Right, and I didn't even bring him up. He's the other name to watch that they drafted him for a reason. And yeah, Kyle Juszczyk is fantastic. If all these players you could get at the exact price that would make sense for the Niners, re-sign all of them. They're all really good football players. But unfortunately, in a cap league, you got to pick who you want to pay, and other teams are going to choose to pay some of these guys. And I think Kyle Juszczyk is going to be offered a ton of money in the open market by a Mike LaFleur or Arthur Smith or Matt LaFleur, one of these guys, and he's probably should take it.
He's the perfect signing for a team that has cap space and is starting over because you can splurge on a fullback. You can be the team that spends the most in the league on a fullback because the wide receiver is not going to want to come to your team right away. I mean, you can get that guy, and then he can build your culture. He can help install the offense. The same reason the Niners got him in 2017.
So you can build. There's 3 things that's important with him, right? 1, he's a great guy, leader, type of guy you want in your locker room. 2, smart, consummate professional, going to teach veteran, going to teach young players how to act and how to respond to wins, losses, and going to give you more credibility as a coach. And 3, if you're a GM signing him, guess what? He's making the Pro Bowl because he's the only fullback who people actually know his name, because the 49ers gave him a ton of notoriety. So you look good because you signed a Pro Bowler. So, yeah, of course.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on. What are your thoughts on Demeco Ryans? We haven't been on together since the Niners made it official that he's the new defensive coordinator. What do you think of this hire? Look, before you say, I don't think they even interviewed anyone for this job. I don't think they even considered anyone else. It was Demeco. It's yours.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I've always been on the Raheem Morris train, and that's who I really wanted.
Makes sense to me.
For, right,
but they now team, and he's ready to go.
Right, they went with Demeco, and I get why they went with Demeco. Promoting within makes your organization more desirable for younger coaches, because they know that they can come in, and if they do the right kind of thing and they work really hard and learn from Kyle Shanahan and all of that, he's willing to promote from within. So it's a great philosophy. I think that there's going to be growing pains, though, with Demeco Ryans, because he's not going to be Robert Saleh. He's going to be different. At least if he tries to be Robert Saleh, then this isn't going to work. But he's going to be different for Robert Saleh. And if you remember Robert Saleh in 2017, there were moments where sometimes his game plan didn't make sense, or sometimes they didn't make the right calls in certain times. And he improved progressively, and I expect Demeco Ryans is going to do the same. But yeah, I think it's going to be a little more on Kyle's plate, where he's going to have to help out Demeco Ryans maybe a little more with game planning and certain ways they want to do certain things just because of that. I don't know much about Demeco Ryans other than he was a really good football player for the Houston Texans, and I had his football card when I was little. So I don't know much beyond that, because we haven't really gotten access to watching him as a coach other than a few sound clips of him sounding very impressive with his presence, his leadership, and all of that. So I'm waiting to see on it. Hopefully he's good.
What's interesting about Demeco is, and what we've been talking about all day, is basically he gets credit for Greenlaw and Warner. I mean, two great third-round pick, a fifth-round pick. They're both studs. He's looked at as this guy who just developed the two MVPs of your defense. But I think what you're saying is that they're the stars. The linebackers are the stars of the defense. But the unsung heroes of the defense are the safeties. And the safeties doing the dirty work, doing the real difficult assignments, allows Greenlaw and Warner and Williams to make plays.
Yeah, so, because what's the linebackers' philosophies, right? It's just play fast and flow sideline to sideline, which means that you're not asking them to do a lot of the thinking, right? You're just asking them to see, go, see, go, see, go. And
now Warner does a lot of thinking, but again, his assignments in pass coverage, they're not like, yo, go line up in the slot and mirror this guy man to man. It's play zone, pick up this crosser.
One, you're going to be the free guy, so you're going to carry the crosser across the field.
And that's a tough assignment, but it's not the same.
Right.
It's not like, hey, just line up there and follow him wherever he goes.
Right. If it's a 2-by-1, understand the route concept, get depth, and figure out how to make a play on the ball and that kind of stuff, where it's not – he doesn't have, I feel like, a specific assignment where you're responsible for this zone, you're responsible for this. It's more let him be a little free and let the other guys play really assignment sound football, which is fantastic. But I think that if you lose one of your better players at playing assignment sound football and doing one of the better things in Jaquiski Tartt, then there might be a little more on Fred Warner's plate. And next year, he might not have the same season in terms of statistics this year, but it doesn't mean he's playing worse by any means. He just has to do a couple more things.
And if you think about what the Niners defense was this year without their pass rush, who had the most difficult assignments on the team? The defense.
Jimmy Ward.
Jason Verrett.
What they asked.
Play on an island with no pass rush. Go get him. We'll try to manufacture a pass rush, but we'll do the best we can.
We'll use fire zones and stimulated pressure, but Jimmy Ward, if you don't guard this guy in man, then none of this is going to work.
And same to you, Jason Verrett. So you could. I wonder if I was Jason Verrett or Jimmy Ward thinking, wow, isn't there a DB coach who should have been in the consideration for this job? I mean, they've got a pretty good DB coach, whoever that guy is, Tony Oden, Mike Rutenberg, whoever. There's a lot of guys with their hand in that. And that, to me, when you think about it, that back end was the star of the defense last year. Not necessarily the linebacker.
I agree. And Tony Oden, he was supposed to bring in man coverage, and we never talked about it, but the DBs were actually quite phenomenal in pattern matching when they had to play man coverage and stuff. They were fantastic at it.
And when Akello Witherspoon and these guys actually played bump and run, they'd get their freaking hands on the guy, which you rarely see in the NFL anymore. A lot of times you see this like press and mirror. It's like, what is the freaking point?
It's press bail, right?
Yeah, like get your hands on the dude, and they did, and it makes a big difference. So
right, and Jimmy Ward tweeted. Remember, he put on his IG story. Shout out to our dude Jason Aponte because he put his tweet on there. But he basically said, find another safety in the NFL that does what I do for just $11 million a year. And he's absolutely right. There's not any other safety that can do what he does because he's basically a cornerback and a safety for this defense.
True. That's true. He has so much experience playing corner and they use him that way. He just doesn't like being named. He just wants to be a safety in name most of the time. But they're like, man, please.
Right.
Please. All right, just call me a safety when I do it.
If he got to just solely play free safety, I guarantee you he would have 4 or 5 interceptions in a season. He's
just so good at doing everything else. He can't afford to. Yeah, well, that's interesting. Jimmy, if you're watching, I appreciate you now. I appreciate you now. I didn't before, but I see the light. And Jaquaski, you too. I hope you guys get to come back next year.
Hey, cue the Toy Story music. Change friend in me to fan in me. Jimmy Ward, you got a fan in me.
I like Jimmy Ward and Jaquaski Tart. Jaquaski Tart's cool. He's very understated. Jimmy Ward's hilarious. He's very funny, and he's got this whole personality that people don't know because he's not a celebrity. So I like when Jimmy Ward has good games because he's hilarious in his press conferences. Really funny.
And they don't put either of them in really front of the mic or let them get the kind of notoriety. Like Kyle Juszczyk. Part of the reason everybody wants Kyle Juszczyk back is because Kyle Juszczyk talks to the after every game.
Yeah, every game. Yep. And Jimmy Ward could. He's just, for whatever reason, people don't go up to him like that. All right, those are all our topics. If you guys want to ask us a couple of questions, you're welcome to. We've probably gone over everything, though. It's been an hour and a half. Big Golden Nugget says Jimmy is super cool. Dude saw me late after a game in parking lot and took the time to get out. Yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised of his car and talk to me. He's really down to earth. All I know is when me and Ryan Sakamoto would go up to him in the locker room when we were like 20, I was 27 and Ryan was a lot younger. He'd be like, "So how you guys doing, man? What's up? What you guys watching on TV?" Like, athletes don't talk to people like that. They might answer your questions, but they're generally not interested. He really is, which means down to earth, really good guy.
Right. Right. And, I am a little biased because I am a huge fan of him. I graduated high school at Northern Illinois University. That's where my high school graduation was. And I didn't my high school graduation just took place in their gym.
That's cool.
Right. Yeah. And he went there. So I have an attachment like that, but yeah, that sounds awesome.
What are they going to do at right guard? Okay, let me come back. The Niners, I propose that the Niners are going to trade Jimmy Garoppolo to the Patriots. Now, I don't think it's just going to be Jimmy for a pick. I think it's going to be very complicated with all kind of picks this year, next year, maybe some players thrown in. Is it possible the Niners could get an offensive lineman from the Patriots in the deal? Maybe the Niners send McGlinchey over and they get swapped McGlinchey. Shaq Mason?
Joe Tooney?
Shaq Mason? Joe Tooney's too good. Joe Tooney's too good.
No. Absolutely not. They don't value this position. They told you that when they paid $3 million to Mike Person last year, and then they decided that the best way to improve their right guard position was take the same $3.5 million that they were spending on Mike Person and now use it on Tom Compton. And that's how they were going to patch the right guard position. So absolutely not. I don't think they're going to do anything at the right guard position besides bring back McKivitz. Maybe one of these undrafted guys like Ross Reynolds is to the point where he can maybe compete for a roster position. And yeah, that's what they're going to do. It's going to be McKivitz. If they get a center, it will be Daniel Brunskill, but it's going to be that combination.
What if it's a hypothetical. What if the Patriots said, "Look, we'll give you a second and and other stuff for Jimmy and some other stuff, but if we throw in Shaq Mason, will you give us Mike McGlinchey?"
Why would the Patriots want Mike McGlinchey? The Patriots run game is a power run game. It's man on man. It's a bit more gap scheme. They're not going to want an athletic right tackle who's really good as a move blocker in the run game.
Because Shaq Mason is 28. He's got a $9.7 million cap number this year, $10.2 million cap number next year. They might want to get a little younger at the position. I don't know. don't know.
And I think you're putting too much value in how much the Patriots want to give up for Jimmy Garoppolo at this
Right.
point. And it seems like a foregone conclusion that they could, if they really wanted him, they could get him because of the way the 49ers are.
Well, if they don't swing a trade, if they don't like get a right guard from the Patriots in the deal, they're gonna have to draft one. They're gonna, because bringing back McKivitz and Compton, I don't think is good enough, and I don't think School showed enough. They can all compete, but I don't necessarily mean that. It doesn't necessarily mean that the winner of that competition is any good.
Agree. But I think they're hoping with continuity and just being able to run the ball more, their offensive line will get better like that.
The way it worked in 2019, basically the way it worked in 2019. Yeah.
Exactly. Young Ty here. I don't know if you can find it. He
What's
asked
that?
the question that everybody 2:14 p.m. He asked the question basically that everybody wants to answer. So I thought we could just get it real quick.
All right, let me find it.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that the 49ers can land Watson?
Okay, yeah. What do you think?
Because I think this is the one. I'm going to say a 2. I don't think. Look, I think we've always looked at it from the perspective of course.
Hold on. Let's start over. The key word here is can, not will. Can they do this? Is it up to them? Is it like, if we give up what they ask, we can definitely have him. It's basically our choice. Or is it like, he's not really available? So
I guess we could
answer.
Okay, so I think that how confident the 49ers can land Watson, like an 8. I think if they were willing, if they were willing to, thank you actually for that. Good point. But I think if they were willing to send the house, like the Herschel Walker deal, like I'm pretty sure Deshaun Watson would want to be a 49er, play with George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, Kyle Shanahan. Of course, who wouldn't want that? Yeah. And maybe you got to sell him a little bit on the state income tax. Going from Texas and wanting to go to Florida, it's going to be a little bit of a tough sell, but that would be the one thing maybe. But yeah, I think if they were willing to just send the house, whatever, we'll worry about next year. We're going to not worry about anything. If we can get him with Kyle, then we can figure everything else out on the fly. Then yeah, 100%. I would say like an 8.
And I agree. I think actually last week I was thinking there's no way. There's just no way. Like the Texans can't do this. It's looking like their hands are tied. It's looking like there's really nothing they can do, and this guy wants to leave. And if he does want to leave, the more I read about the situation, the more I'm like, yeah, dude, you need to go, man. They hired that Easterby guy who would have employees come and hold his hand for divine intervention. I was like, yeah, dude, you probably need to leave the Texans. So if he demands a trade, which is within his rights, and he lists the Niners as one of the whatever X amount of team that he'd be willing to go to, then I think it's basically just down to the Niners. Do you want to do it?
Yeah,
and what? I don't know that they should want to do it. But again, what I'm saying is if you trade 4 first-round picks, you probably can get those picks back down the line if it doesn't work out. That's all I'm saying. Maybe do it. It's something to think about. I don't know.
I think it's unfortunate for the Texans.
It would be interesting if the two teams competing the hardest to get him were the Niners and Jets. It would be so funny because the Niners have, I guess, they got a better roster to offer. But, Deshaun might prefer going to the Niners, but the Texans might prefer the Jets offer.
The Jets, right.
Yeah. And then, from Deshaun's perspective, he might feel like, you know what? I wanted the Texans to interview Robert Saleh. I like the idea of playing for him. I like the idea of playing in New York. Maybe they're not ready to compete right away, but maybe they are. Maybe I can turn this team around. And if they get a guy like Jamar Chase or Devontae Smith or whatever, then we can compete. Yeah, I don't know. It'd be really interesting if it came down to Saleh and Shanahan. And it'd be cool if they could actually get the guy and extend the deal and explain to him, like, look, Deshaun, you're great, but no quarterback ever has won making the money you are. Can we work this out? Can we give you a partial ownership in the team? Is there any way to lower your cap number so you win championships? You want to win championships too. You don't want to be Russell Wilson. You don't want to be that. And you know what it feels like because you just went 4-12. So can we work around? Let me give you, there's got to be some way they can circumvent the cap, right? Or is that just way against the rules? It's against the rules. Pay guys under the table.
Who knows? Hey, real quick. A bombshell kind of just dropped. Steve Weiss just put out a story basically saying that from everybody he's talked to, it's like a kind of like a essay type piece that McVay and Goff need marriage counseling. And
Oh,
so
okay, I think anyone can tell that.
yeah,
They don't
no,
need marriage counseling. They need a new quarterback. I'm on McVay's side,
I
man.
100% agree.
Ain't no
I'm on
counseling.
McVay's side. I
Nah.
think McVay's actually handled this situation beautifully. And I think the one thing that's going to look bad on Kyle is if, in spite of Jared Goff's cap number, McVay just says, look, I'm done. This isn't working. Get me a new quarterback, and just gets rid of him this offseason. Because it'll be what Kyle hasn't had the conviction to do, which is just move off of Jimmy and figure it out at the quarterback position. But so I think it'll be interesting.
Because the way I look at the Rams is you could put in 25 quarterbacks on that team and they would do better. I mean, geez, that's a hell of a defense and a hell of a run game.
Agreed. Goff makes a few high-level throws occasionally, but there's nothing there mentally. There's not much of a decision-making process.
Can't really move that well.
Right?
He doesn't throw off platform. He can't handle pressure.
No.
Yeah. No. Okay.
He's really tough in the pocket.
No. Sean says, I think we are one free agent or high draft center away from a great offensive line. What free agent centers are available? I think that would solve the butt clinchy. Well, the all-pro center of the league is available, Corey Linsley, right?
Yeah.
He's available.
Yeah.
If you through the nose on a center, you can do it.
I guarantee you Green Bay lets him walk. Green Bay has this incredible culture of drafting offensive linemen in the middle rounds and developing them. Josh Sitton, TJ Lang, Corey Linsley. I mean, David Bakhtiari is the Hall of Famer who they've kept, but Bakhtiari, look at Elton Jenkins this year. Billy Turner has played like five different offensive different offensive line positions. So I wouldn't be surprised if Green Bay just lets him walk, but I think he would be way outside of the 49ers price range.
And again, my idea is, and we didn't really go through it in the Trent Williams thing, is if you feel like you don't necessarily need to sign the best left tackle in the league, you say instead of getting a Hall of Fame left tackle, maybe it makes more sense on our team with our salary structure to get the third best left tackle on the market, who's got some limitations, but is also $10 million, $15 million a year cheaper, and then spend the savings on another starter. Get two starters for the price of one. I don't know if you could get Linsley and a left tackle who's good for the Trent Williams money, but that's my idea. Alejandro Villanueva and a starting center as opposed to, and maybe not Villanueva, but a good left tackle who can play 16 games and a good center who can play 16 games as opposed to a Hall of Fame left tackle.
Your guy, Leo Luna, has always put it out of 49ers Goldmine that the Alex Mack idea. I've always thought that was a good one. That would be kind of what the Rams did, right, in 2017. McVay's quick fix of getting Whitworth and John Sullivan. So
Whitworth. Yep.
That would be a short-term solution, maybe get Alex Mack. But who knows how cheap they can get Alex Mack and all of that.
And then Alex Mack
the way it looks, it's really difficult to think about outside free agents that we would like the Niners to sign or they need to sign because they have so many of their own that they need to figure out how to sign and pay.
He went to Cal. Alex Mack was good, but he was there after Rodgers. He was there for like the Deshaun Watson, the Deshaun Jackson years. And I forget who the quarterback was on that team. But anyway, Alex Mack. Maybe he wants to come back to the Bay. Draft Rashawn Slater and start him at right guard, then move him to right tackle when you have to pay Mike. I don't know who that is, but I like the idea. I don't know who Rashawn Slater is.
Yeah,
you know who that is? I don't know.
No, I haven't really looked at
Let's wait till the Senior Bowl, man. I'll know these guys after the Senior Bowl. Alex Mack from Cal. Yep. All right. I think we're winding down a little bit here.
Yeah.
What?
Do you see any? I mean, I see
Nate Longshore. You're right. That was him. When will the cornerback scouting begin? In the next couple of weeks. Well, when the Senior Bowl happens, that's when it'll all start.
I think Grant's going to like these cornerbacks. I think his first-round pick mock will end up being a quarterback, and I guarantee you that the 49ers will not take a quarterback.
That's what happens every year since 2013 when I wanted him to take Rhodes instead of Eric Reed. It's the same thing every year. So
yeah. And the thing is, I think it's the most fun position to watch just because they're the best athletes on the field. They're the most athletic people. So Like when you watch those guys, it's like, wow, these guys just move different from everybody else. They're so fast, they're so explosive.
And their assignment is impossible. It's like, hey, you see Tyreek Hill over there, the most athletic player in the league? Cover him. You have no idea where he's going, but you need to be on his hip. Like, okay. And a guy who can do that, it's like, wow, what an amazing athlete. Yep, I agree. It's rare.
Someone's asking Vish, would you rather trade Warner or Bosa? You want to take that impossible question?
Sure. I know what I would rather do. And it's a great question. It's a great question.
Yeah.
I know it right now, but you know what I would say.
I know what you would say.
A lot of
but
reasons.
here's so I don't have an answer right now. Here, I'll break down the pros and cons, right? Fred Warner starts every game. I know that's why you would lean Fred Warner. He's played every game since he's come in the NFL, and he's a leader of this team. The big problem is that Nick Bosa plays a much more premium position than Fred Warner, and he's excellent at it. So I think that would be the kind of like two arguments that you would make for each player. Ultimately, I think I would take Warner just because of health and because he's established himself as like the go-to guy within this organization in terms of you're talking future leaders. It seems to be George Kittle. It seems to be Fred Warner. If you miss a full season like Nick Bosa, you can't establish yourself like that. And that's why right now I would say Fred Warner is the guy I wouldn't trade of the two.
Yeah, I mean, I think as long as he's healthy and doing his thing, he's worth whatever the Niners pay for him. You can make him the highest paid middle linebacker in the league and pay him 9% of your cap or less, and he's worth that. He's worth that. The problem, what I said earlier, is DNs and quarterbacks. They're just paid too much because everyone agrees that they're the two most important positions, and they are. But now you start paying premiums because of that accepted knowledge. So you look at, first of all, he's torn both ACLs. He's had injury issues. That's part of the equation. But that's not the biggest factor here. The biggest factor is that his
when
brother,
you have to pay him, you're going to have to pay him 5 years, $140 million.
It's ridiculous. He's not a quarterback. Quarterback shouldn't make that much money, and a DN shouldn't make that much money.
The problem with paying a DN that much money is this year, I don't think it was that expensive for Joey Bosa because I think he was still playing on his fifth-year option. But what happens when it comes to next year, this is the Khalil Mack situation. Now, I'm in Chicago, so I see Khalil Mack all the time. Khalil Mack is still one of the best players in the NFL. He's fantastic. But the problem is when you're paying him $24 million, you expect him to dominate every single play the way Aaron Donald does. And he has to impact every single play because you pay a quarterback because the quarterback has the ball in his hands every single play. And unfortunately, it's an impossible, monumental task to ask Khalil Mack. He can't physically impact every single play.
Just as it's impossible to ask Russell Wilson to drag that flawed team to a Super Bowl victory. It's the same problem. It's the same thing. It's too much for one guy. And again, look at Khalil Mack. Next year, his cap percentage, no. This year, his cap percentage was 12.5. He made 26.6 this year. That's exactly what Jimmy made. You can't do that. In retrospect, John Gruden was right. He just shouldn't have drafted Josh Jacobs with that pick. But, he was right. You can't spend that much money really on any player, let alone a DN, in my opinion. So what was the question? Yeah, I would be more willing to trade Bosa because I just feel he's going to get $30 million a year. So what you could do is you could trade him, get 3 first-round picks, and maybe get another Nick Bosa or someone who's 80% of what he is plus 2 more players. I think that's the way to go. I don't know. I think that's the way to go. Good question, though. I've been thinking about that. It's a really good question. Do you want to give Nick Bosa that contract? And the fact that the Chargers gave Joey Bosa that contract, I wonder if Robert Saleh looked at that as a positive or a negative. And if the reason he went to the Jets is because it was just more of a clean slate. Because to me, the fact that he passed on the Chargers or didn't even let it get to a point where they would give him that second, because he was flying there to get the second interview and then he agreed to the Jets. You could have had Justin Herbert, but you have a lot of bad contracts on the Jets, not bad contracts, but big contracts.
So I don't know. Here's the problem. If you take the Chargers job, you have to win year one. Second year, Justin Herbert with the level of players on that defense, there's no room for error. Robert Saleh gets to go build his own roster and thing, and there will be pressure to win year 2, year 3 like that. And I think Kyle kind of set that example. This feels like, Brandon Staley, Robert Saleh is actually kind of mirroring Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan.
No doubt.
Sean McVay went to the Los Angeles Rams, and that required him to win from day one. Kyle Shanahan went to the San Francisco 49ers and got to build his own thing. And they've both been wildly successful. It's just been in different ways. And just like that, Brandon Staley is going to the better roster with this set in stone, very good quarterback and a very good GM in Tom Telesco, who's proven that he's excellent at drafting. And so there's going to be pressure on him, and he's probably going to, if he's a good coach, he's going to succeed from day one. Robert Saleh, on the other hand, is going to go through growing pains because he's going to build the roster the way he wants to.
Right. And one thing real quick that I find is interesting, these teams prefer offensive coaches. They want offensive coaches, which is why it took Saleh this amount of time to get the job. But I think what they're noticing is the offensive coaches are so picked over that if you hire one, you're probably getting a mid-tier guy at best at this point. The idea that you're going to get Sean McVay, no, you're going to get Zach Taylor or Cliff Kingsbury. If you want a defensive coach, right, or Adam Gase, if you want a defensive coach, it's not what you had in mind. It's not what you wanted, but there's been such good ones passed over for years because they're not offensive coaches. You could get a premium guy, the best defensive coach in the league, as opposed to Adam Gase. And I think teams are like, okay, well, maybe we should try that. Maybe this Staley guy's pretty good. Maybe this Saleh guy's pretty good. Not exactly what we had in mind, but he's better than Gase.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Very interesting.
And yeah.
We have one more question. We'll take it and then we'll bounce. It's from David Brown. Is Kyle gone? Is Kyle gone if Saleh has a better record this year? Improbable, but not impossible.
No way.
He just signed a 6-year extension.
Yeah.
So what it means is Kyle can actually mess around. Kyle can start a rookie quarterback next year if he wants to. He can do whatever he wants. Am I wrong?
No, Kyle Shanahan is basically he has the most job. He has the highest job security within this organization, thus making him absolutely, whether it's in question, whether it was ever in question, but now it can never be put in question. He's the most powerful person within this organization. And so I don't think there's any way that they could let him go, because that would mean that Jed messed up by giving him the extension and giving him the entire keys to the to run the franchise. And I think that they got to let him do whatever he thinks is best for the next few years, because they got what they deem and what I deem a very special coach. And so you got to play the long game with him. Right. You can't be upset over one small decision and just get rid of him.
Right. And coming back to what we said earlier, I'm predicting that the Niners are going to get rid of Jimmy Garoppolo and trade him. And they would have to do that probably in March. And that's going to take a leap of faith from the fans. Be like, hey, you said he was coming back. And Kyle's going to be like, trust me. Yeah. I'm going to get my guy. And I think Niner fans will be like, all right, cool, man. Get your guy. We trust you. So if his guy is Zach Wilson, he can do that. A lot of coaches can't. A lot of coaches couldn't move off a veteran quarterback with a 24-8 record or whatever it is and say, I like Zach Wilson. I like this rookie from BYU. Kyle can do that. Now, it may be the wrong decision ultimately, but if that's what he wants to do, he's free to do it. And he just
absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think, honestly, quarterback next year is going to be Watson or Wilson. I don't think it's necessarily what I would do. You know what I would do, but it's a more conservative route. And if they're going to move off Jimmy Garoppolo, they kind of have to have an exciting alternative. Move up 5 spots for Wilson. Trade whatever it takes for Watson. I kind of feel like that's the way this is going. No Niner fan would be mad if they got rid of Jimmy and brought in Zach Wilson. It may not work out, but they'd be up for it.
From what I know about fans, being a fan currently myself, Niners fans are going to convince themselves that even if the 49ers start Nick Mullins next year, that this is somehow the best thing for the franchise and the correct decision. Just exactly the same way everybody didn't want Jim Tomsula, but convinced themselves through the months of March and June that this roster is going to be okay and that Jim Tomsula is going to be good, and Jim Tomsula would have been good. And then when they got rid of Tomsula, they convinced themselves that, we didn't want Chip Kelly. All these bad things came from Philadelphia about Chip Kelly, but Chip Kelly is bringing science to the 49ers, and there's all of this thought process. So fans ultimately, because that's part of what being a fan is, they're going to be convinced that the organization is doing the right thing for whatever short period of time.
Got to be faithful.
Mm-hmm. And there's nothing wrong with that.
No, there's nothing wrong with that. Last one. Brian Bergquist. Sorry, Brian. Bergquist. I can do it. Coming in late, let Trent walk, re-sign a few more players with that cap priorities, tackle first and draft. Thoughts? It's kind of what I was arguing. The only problem is it's a bad year to draft a tackle, right? If you can't get that kid from Oregon who looks like Trent Williams 2.0 or Tony Baselli or whatever Orlando Pace, really freaking good. He's going to be a top 5 pick. If you can't get him, I don't think it's the year. I think you're looking at guards and centers and stuff. Last year was the year. So it works. I think if you let Trent walk, you got to sign a guy. I think you're going to sign a left tackle one way or another.
Yeah, and I don't think the left tackle market is quite good even this year.
Russell Okung, Alejandro Villanueva. And Trent Williams' point is that basically these guys don't hit the market usually. They usually get tagged or traded.
No. You never see a player of Trent Williams' caliber. I mean, did the Ravens let Ronnie Stanley hit the market? Have the Dallas Cowboys ever let Tyron Smith hit the market?
And the fact that if the Steelers are going to let Villanueva hit the market, that tells you something about
Villanueva. He's done. Villanueva is done.
Yeah.
I mean, if you didn't think he was done when Nick Bosa was trucking him,
oh my God. Year, and whatever numbers he put up this year is because the average time to throw in Pittsburgh was like 8 nanoseconds, right?
Yeah, because they threw the ball 2 yards within 2 yards of the line of scrimmage. Yeah.
Hey, Vish, thanks so much for giving me 2 hours today, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm going to be going on with Vish later in the week on his channel. So we'll have a double dose of me and Vish. Is Blake going to be on with us too?
Of course. It'll be the three of us.
Looking forward to it. We had 914 people watching us. Thank you so much for hanging with us. This was a full-length movie today. I hope you found it entertaining. And we'll be back on Friday. So talk to you then.